The midday sun bore down on the dusty main street of Harmony Gulch, baking the wooden storefronts and raising a haze from the ground. A lazy, late summer wind kicked up small swirls of grit, rattling the tin signs of the saloon and the general store. The town was quiet, the kind of quiet that held a certain tension, as if everyone was holding their breath. At the center of it all stood the cage. It was a crude thing, fashioned from thick iron bars and bolted to a heavy wooden platform. Inside, crouched low, was the widow. No one knew her real name, only the fearful whispers that had followed her from town to town. They called her the giant widow, because of her immense size and the unverified tales of her supernatural strength. She was a figure of fear, a dark legend given form. A weathered sign hung on the bars, its painted letters faded but still legible, $10 to touch beast. The words were a stark reminder of her status, not as a person, but as a spectacle. Her powerful, muscular arms rested on her knees, the veins visible beneath her tanned skin. She was dressed in a simple, dirt-stained tank top and worn leather shorts, her long, dark hair tied back in a messy knot. Her posture was one of weary resignation, her gaze fixed on the ground. She seemed to have given up on fighting the whispers, the stares, the fear that clung to her like a second skin. A tall figure emerged from the shade of the general store, his boots making a soft, crunching sound on the gravel. This was Silas Thorne, a rancher known for his quiet demeanor and steady gaze. He was a man of the land, his hands calloused from years of working with horses and cattle. He wore a simple, unadorned cowboy hat that shadowed his eyes, a light-colored shirt, and a pair of worn-in jeans. He was a man of purpose, and today, that purpose led him straight to the cage. The few townsfolk who were out on the street watched him with a mix of curiosity and dread. No one ever approached the cage. To do so was to invite the unknown, to challenge the fear that had been so carefully cultivated. Silas paid them no mind. He walked with a calm, measured pace, the jingle of his spurs the only sound in the oppressive silence. He stopped a few feet from the cage, his gaze fixed not on the sign, but on the woman inside. The widow didn't look up. She was used to the scrutiny, the hushed whispers, the occasional thrown rock. She had built walls around herself, walls of stone and silence, to protect the last fragile embers of her spirit. "Excuse me, ma'am," Silas's voice was deep and calm, a soothing balm in the tense air. He wasn't loud, but the words carried, cutting through the silence. She flinched slightly, her head snapping up. Her eyes, a startling shade of green, met his. There was a flicker of surprise in their depths, quickly replaced by the familiar guard. She had expected to be challenged, cursed at, or gawked at. Not addressed with respect. "I'd like to speak with the owner of this cage," Silas said, his gaze unwavering. A man stepped out of the saloon, a self-satisfied grin on his face. This was Barnaby Finch, the man who had brought the widow to Harmony Gulch. He was a showman, a barker, a man who profited from fear and spectacle. "That'd be me," Finch said, puffing out his chest. "What's it to ya, cowboy?" "I'm here to buy her," Silas said simply, gesturing towards the widow. A collective gasp went through the onlookers. Finch's grin faltered, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. "Buy her? You can't just buy a person, mister. She's a commodity. A show. Then I'll buy your show," Silas corrected him. "Name your price." Finch, a shrewd man at heart, quickly recovered. "She's a dangerous one. A handful. You'll need a lot of money to take her off my hands." "She's worth her weight in gold, that one is." "I'm a rancher, not a fool," Silas said, his voice retaining its calm, but with a new edge of steel. "Name a price, and we'll be done with this." A silent negotiation passed between the two men, and finally, Finch named a price. It was a steep one, but Silas didn't hesitate. He reached into his saddlebag, pulled out a thick wad of bills, and handed them to Finch. The showman's eyes widened as he counted the money, his earlier bravado replaced by a greedy satisfaction. With the transaction complete, Finch produced a key, a large, rusty thing that looked as old as the cage itself. He held it out to Silas, a sly smirk on his face. "She's all yours, cowboy. Good luck with her." He then turned and retreated back into the saloon, the crowd dispersing as he went. Silas turned back to the cage. The widow watched him, her eyes a mix of confusion and fear. She had been bought and sold before, but always as a spectacle, a freak. She had never been addressed with such simple, quiet dignity. Silas knelt down, his gaze level with hers. He inserted the key into the heavy lock, and with a soft click, it opened. The sound was deafening in the sudden quiet. He pushed the heavy gate open, then stepped back, extending a hand to her. "The name's Silas," he said. "Silas Thorne. The widow stared at his hand. It was a big hand, but gentle, the fingers calloused but steady. She had been offered many things in her life, but never a hand of simple, human kindness. Slowly, cautiously, she reached out, her fingers brushing against his. Her skin was warm, not cold and monstrous as the townsfolk believed. Silas took her hand firmly, and helped her stand. As she rose, the full extent of her height became apparent. She told over him, a solid head taller, and her muscles rippled beneath her skin. She was truly a giantess, a force of nature. Silas wasn't intimidated. He simply held her hand, his gaze still steady. My ranch is a few miles from here. It's quiet. You'll be safe there. She pulled her hand away, her eyes flicking around the empty street. She was free, but the world still seemed to be a cage. She was still the giant widow, the object of fear and disgust. Why? She asked, her voice a low, gravelly whisper. It was a question she hadn't dared to ask in a long time. Why did you buy me? Silas smiled. It was a small, gentle smile that reached his eyes. Because I don't believe in monsters, he said softly. I only see a woman who's been hurt and deserves to be free. He led her to his horse, a sturdy sorrel mare. He helped her into the saddle, and then mounted his own horse. He didn't use a rope or a chain. He trusted her. The silent journey to the ranch was filled with a sense of quiet grace. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The air grew cooler, and a soft breeze stirred the leaves of the cottonwood trees. They arrived at the ranch as twilight fell. The house was a simple, two-story structure with a wrap-around porch. A warm light spilled from the windows, a beacon of home and welcome. There were no cages, no signs, no stairs. Just the quiet sound of crickets and the smell of fresh-cut hay. Silas led her inside, and she was met with the sight of a cozy living room, a crackling fireplace, and a dinner table set for two. It was a sight so normal, so domestic, that it brought a lump to her throat. I cooked some stew, Silas said, gesturing to the pot simmering on the stove. It's not much, but it's hot. They ate in a comfortable silence. The widow watched him, amazed by his quiet strength, his unyielding kindness. She had been so used to being seen as an object, a threat. He saw her as a person. After dinner, he led her to a small, comfortable bedroom. This is yours, he said simply. Rest. The world can wait until morning. She lay awake for a long time, listening to the quiet of the night. She was free. The realization was a staggering weight, a fragile, new thing. She had been given a chance to be human again, a chance she thought she had lost forever. Over the next few weeks, the widow slowly began to heal. Silas never pushed her, never demanded anything of her. He simply gave her space, respect, and kindness. He taught her how to tend to the horses, how to mend a fence, how to work the land. He saw her strength not as a curse, but as a gift. He saw her for who she was, not who she was rumored to be. He called her by her real name, Lilith, a name she had almost forgotten. The sound of it on his lips was a new kind of freedom. One evening, as the sun set over the rolling hills, they sat on the porch swing, watching the stars begin to appear. The air was cool and fragrant with the scent of pine. Silas turned to her, his gaze gentle and serious. Lilith, he said, his voice a low rumble. I have something to ask you. Her heart fluttered in her chest. She had been waiting for this. Not in a panicked, fearful way, but with a quiet hope she hadn't known she possessed. Silas knelt down in front of her, his hands clasped together. I know this is sudden, and I know you've been through more than anyone should have to. But I see you, Lilith. I see the woman you are, not the story they've made you into. I've seen your kindness, your gentleness, your strength. And I've fallen in love with all of it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple gold ring. Lilith, he asked, his voice full of hope and a profound, quiet sincerity, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, and help me build a home, a life, and a future together? Lilith looked at him, at the simple gold band, and then at his kind, earnest eyes. This was the twist she never saw coming. The rancher didn't fear her. He loved her. He wanted to give her a home, a life, a future. A chance to be more than just a memory of a cage. She felt the last of the walls she had built around her heart crumble to dust. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of release, of hope, of an overwhelming gratitude. She extended her hand, and Silas gently slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. She reached out and pulled him close, holding him in her strong arms. Yes, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. 1,000 times, yes. The night was filled with the silent promise of a new life, a new beginning. She was no longer the giant widow. She was Lilith, a woman loved and cherished, a woman finally, truly free.